I mean, you cannot see anything from here.
You are the spark when I'm
Yes, I'm Christoph. Magnussen. Hello, I have a meeting with Coen van
I
Oostrom.
am a shark in this blood in the water. We're far apart, but I'm looking right at you. We're far apart, let's bring it together.
All right. We're here at Amsterdam, and actually we wanted to record a podcast with Coen van Oostrom 2 weeks ago already. We had to postpone it. So now we're here. It's the guy who builds Europe's most sustainable building, and actually one of the buildings with a lot of AI technology in the building. Actually, it gives energy back to the grid, and now we see where we find. Hello. Hi. Excuse me. I have a meeting with Coen. Welcome to the On the Way to New Work podcast. I speak English today. Michael is not here, Katinka is not here, but I'm in Amsterdam, and I have the big opportunity to meet Coen van Oostrom. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome here in Amsterdam.
Thank you. And we already tried to record the podcast in Berlin, but I'm quite happy that we do it here because we just entered the building, and this is what it's all about. You guys make buildings, and not just some buildings, but amazing buildings. I mean, we film it as well, so you have to look it up on YouTube if you just listen to the podcast now. But before we do that, and before we dive into the building story, maybe you give a little bit of background for yourself, and who are you and how did you become the person you are today?
So I started in real estate almost 25 years ago. I studied economics in Rotterdam, and I started to work for somebody who rented out rooms to students. And he was so successful that I figured out it would be better for me to have my own real estate. And I borrowed a little bit of money and bought a very, very small house in Rotterdam, and rented it out to students, then bought a second one, and that became a company with a whole portfolio. Slowly moved into real estate development. And then 12 years ago I had a big wake-up call. I met Al Gore. He told me about global warming, and of course I'd read about it, and I thought it was more a political theme than a real theme. But he convinced me, and I started to work on it. We put a lot of efforts in the company on it. Made a building that became energy neutral. I started to invest more in it. Made the Edge building, which became famous and maybe a metaphor for a new generation of buildings. Buildings that are not only smart, but very sustainable, healthy, etc. And then we decided to just do that, only make the best building in town, and that's where we are today.
So this story is now super short, so you could put it to a press release. What I'm interested in when it comes to new work, you started in real estate, and there are a lot of people in real estate, and they are interested in money first. And there is, I guess, a backstory to the story to convince your company, and also, of course, like first of all, go into real estate, which is a big step. If you're young, I would be interested in that, and how it was, and how you started, and how it felt, and what is different today compared to the old days. And then the step in changing the model into more sustainable buildings. If everyone was saying, yes, let's do that, like today, or how that was.
So when I started, the real estate industry was very much an industry of face-to-face contacts, networking. You had the big conferences in that time, in the south of France, the MIPIM, where everybody got together. Brokers were making a lot of money, and if you started in the industry, one of the reasons to go there was that you would drive a BMW and feel proud that you were sort of in a game around a certain product, but the product was not so important. There was a lot of money behind it. These were the years of Donald Trump, and he was one of the big players in that game. The game over the last 25 years has completely changed. It has professionalized. And I'm not saying that there's not an element left of that old money game, but nowadays sustainability has become a main theme. The culture of the people has changed. Almost everybody has a university degrees nowadays. There's all kinds of master educations around sustainability, but also around construction. The prop tech industry is disrupting everything that is being done at the moment, and there's a lot of talent flowing into the industry. I would say back in the day, if you would join a real estate company and your grandmother would ask you, hey, did you not get good grades in school? Is that why you have to work in real estate? And nowadays, some of the best, smartest people in the world enter that industry and are successful. So I think that's a great step forward.
How was it when you then decided, like you said you met Al Gore, I guess this doesn't happen by accident, or like...
We won a competition for a new headquarters for a company called TNT, the express company. And the CEO was a big fan of Al Gore and a big fan of sustainability. And we were going to make his headquarters, and he then got Al Gore to come to the Netherlands, and he organized a CEO roundtable. And we were by far the smallest company in the room, but he asked me to come and join as well. And I, by that time, really thought it was, a little bit of a Greenpeace kind of topic, and I wasn't really a fan of that kind of thinking. And then he said something very important. He said, we're here in the Netherlands. If in the Netherlands the dikes break, then that is not a political theme. It is something where everybody in the Netherlands will stand shoulder to shoulder and rebuild the dikes. So this is the same kind of setting. Global warming is so big, it's so important. It has nothing to do with your political affiliation. It's something that you have to solve. And I said, wow, that's amazing. But why companies? Why don't you talk to the government or to NGOs? And he said, well, in the end, it's the companies that make the products that cause the problems, and with the products also we can solve it. And then he asked me, he said, what kind of company do you have? And I said, well, I've got a real estate company. And he said 40% of global carbon emissions come through buildings.
40%?
40%.
Wow.
Some people say 38, but that's that range.
Big leverage.
And not only that, he said, if you want to spend $1 somewhere, it's best spent in real estate. Because even if you don't like sustainability, if you don't even think it's true, whatever, in most cases you can invest $1 and make it back in 7 to 10 years. And it's a no-brainer, especially with current interest rates, to do that investment. And we just have to start it and scale it up. Scalability is a problem though, but with the help of institutions like what Gore is doing, what Clinton was doing, we managed to do it in a lot of projects so far. And bit by bit we're learning how to do it quicker, cheaper, and how to grow faster.
How was your, how did you convince how big were you back then in the company?
I think we had like 60 people, 250 million turnover. So. And
they all said that's a great idea.
No. People were really like, they were like, what the fuck? Well, this is completely different than what we're doing. And I went a little bit too far because I told people let's get rid of the BMWs and let's buy Toyota Priuses for everybody because we have to send a message to the market. And people didn't like it. But interesting things happened. One guy raised his arm and said, hey, actually I never told you this, but I studied physics. And I said, yeah, I know that. He said, but I'm a specialist in climate modeling. And I worked for 2 years for Greenpeace. I never told you this story because I know it was not very popular here. But I was on a ship, measuring ice in the North Pole and South Pole. And I know everything there is to know about, global warming, what the underlying effects are, etc. And he said, I love to join the team that's going to research this and it's going to find solutions for it. Another person said, hey, Koen, do you really want to force me to give up my BMW and sit in the Toyota Prius? And I said, yeah, we have to send a message to the market, it's important. He said, I don't like Toyota Priuses, but I have a better idea. He said, did you know that the emissions per kilometer of a Toyota Prius are 107 grams? And that a Mini Cooper has 104 grams. But a Mini Cooper is a way cooler car. So, if you do sustainability, you can do this sort of somewhat negative, we're not allowed, and let's punish ourselves as some sort of Calvinistic sustainability, or you can do Elon Musk style, Tesla, happy sustainability. Let's go happy. Let's be faster and more with more fun. And so we did a deal with BMW. We sold all our cars, and we got minis in return. And we made a beautiful advertisement with 45 minis that we had, and actually people from university called us and said, hey, I want to work for that company where you get a mini when you work there. Now people get bikes in our company, so things are changing fast. But in that time there was a big statement, and it was interesting because if a big company, let's say a Coca-Cola, would do a tender and say we need a new office building in the Netherlands, and they would invite 5 developers. then 4 of those developers would drive up in really big cars and with drivers and then one team would arrive in 2 Mini Coopers, and that alone would tell a story and would give us an easy access to the hearts of the customer.
And what I like about we're coming more and more into the topic of sustainability as well in the podcast when it comes to new work. Of course, everyone's talking about it. We just had a discussion on the way. We were live streaming from the bus. We're on the way with the bus right now instead of flying. And one guy said, why do you do live stream for 20 people? This also takes energy. And then we said, well, yes, that's right, but there's a bigger leverage. I mean, if the 2 of us were like traveling by plane this week, there will be like 8 flights. Right now we share something about sustainability, so sending a statement versus like having an impact. And the number you just said about the leverage, the impact, 40%, that just blew my mind, because people, like, I don't have the numbers exactly how much is caused by planes, by cars, by anything else, but 40% is huge.
Yeah.
So if we look into that, just building or the whole industry or everyone who is like how could you like take that apart to give a bit more of background, because you said scalability is the difficult thing.
Yeah, scalability is a difficult thing, and the difficult thing in the real estate industry is that 40% comes from existing buildings, and most of the focus at the moment is on new buildings. And if you build a new building, it's now possible to do that energy neutral or almost energy neutral. And so what you see is if new offices are being built, it's
the building process itself.
The building process.
And then like the edge is giving energy back to the grid. Okay.
And that's pretty cool. But that's not the problem. If you look at a city like Berlin, there is like 2 million houses or so. And these 2 million houses, they produce a lot of energy. And now to go into these houses, in these offices, in these factories and churches and whatever is there, there's a lot of work to be done in these existing buildings, and ownership is very fragmented. The Netherlands is a little bit easier because 1/3 of the houses in the Netherlands are owned by social housing communities. And there are like 100 of those that own 30%, 35% of the stock. And there you can do a big deal, and they call it a Green Deal now at the moment. It's being written, and then all these houses year by year will be transformed. But in cities where that's not the case, then you have to find a way to maybe put a little bit of taxes on houses that are very unsustainable, and give a little bit of subsidy to people that are willing to make that step and upgrade their houses. But then the people living in those houses, they sometimes object that, and they are voters, and it's difficult for politicians to really have the courage to step up and do that. Luckily, I think voters are also now waking up, and you can see that also in Germany the Grüne are very popular, and slowly these things are moving. What is missing? What is missing is that there should be really close contact between the companies and the government on how to write the legislation into doing this. And the companies that are spearheading this movement of change are very often the companies that are not at the table to discuss these changes. Very often, what does the government do? They will invite the largest construction company in the country, but these people are pretty old school in most cases. And so the trick will be to get some young thinkers, some people from the prop tech industry, put them at a table and say, hey, how can we change the model? How can we make sure that there will be a real urge for owners of real estate to pick this up and do things differently?
What do you think? I mean, we're now in a very positive market at the moment, so whenever there's pressure in the market, usually people start to make stupid things and crazy things. And then you have also like the large development companies, maybe not all of them are driven by green or sustainability, but more by the money behind it. How could you solve it even if in a time when there's a lot of pressure? I mean, it seems like you have found a model here. Is that something you could transform to other companies?
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity that we didn't do it in the crisis. I think in Germany and for sure in the Netherlands, there were thousands of construction workers laid off, and there was a huge opportunity then to use that power to give it a go. Today, the pressure in the market is such that it's difficult to get anything done, infrastructure or investment in sustainability. But slowly the markets are getting back to normal again, and slowly we see cities waking up and seeing that it's basically in their scope that they can do something about the problem. And so we think that the next 3 to 5 years are going to be very important. There's a mismatch at the moment. There is some legislation, there is some subsidy arrangement, but even for a company like ours, and we have a serious turnover, we have now more than 100 people working for us, to really see where the subsidies are going and how the organization in cities is pretty complex still. Especially for us, we work in different countries, and Berlin is completely different than London is different than Amsterdam, and it's a pity that we have Europe, but this is something that is not organized on a European level. And politicians could make life a little bit easier by harmonizing that.
The term new work, we were just quickly talking about it, and it comes to my mind for a reason. It was invented by a guy who is now 88 years old, Friedrich Bergmann. He came up with it like way beyond, like more than 40 years ago. And during the time when a lot of car manufacturer workers in the US were laid off. And he made the suggestion, they don't like their work anyways, because it's like they have to do it, they have to earn the money. But why don't we help them with half of the time that they are then off, and the other half they're working, instead of like laying half of them off. With half of the time we help them to find out what they really, really want to do. Not what they just like to do and a little bit of job, but what they really, really want to do. And he helped them in centers for new work, that's how he called it, to find out these things. And of course they work a little bit in the car manufacturing industry and a little bit maybe something different. And this comes up to my mind because the industry, the real estate industry, is of course something that is closely connected to the economy. And if you just mentioned the workers and a lot of layoffs that you have, is maybe this what you really, really want to do connected to the sustainability topic? Could you see that with your own story or with the people in your company, especially when you said in the old days you went to a real estate company and said, oh, didn't you find a better job, and now people want to come? Is this changing for that reason, or how is it with your story?
It's a good question. I think that over time these things are changing. I think that there's a couple of things. I think that in the times when stuff was hard, on the one hand there was a lot more capacity to think about these topics, but everybody was trying to survive the 2008 crisis, and then it was not so easy to really put resources on it. What we noticed, by the way, is that in that time it was actually possible for us to stay alive. The crisis in the Netherlands was pretty tough. But the money that the banks had, they were only doing in projects that were sort of the right projects, and sustainability played a role there, so that was good. I think a much bigger factor for us today is that there's a whole new generation entering the workforce, the millennial generation, and they are not so busy with making money and being successful, etc. They have other values that drive them, and sustainability, but not only sustainability, it's a whole new perspective on life and on life values, is what is important for them. And that is pushing this discussion also in the right direction. Because if I would allow people to make a project, and the project would just be a project about building something, making money with it, no values underneath, then right away people would say, hey, it's not cool to work in this project, and can I work on another project? But if I would tell them, go make a building in Hamburg, and we want to show the Hamburg market that we can push this to a different level, then they right away will do it. And what you see then is that this new generation is also not focused anymore on working, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the afternoon and doing their things. They're everywhere and nowhere. They hate it if they have to file for holiday days and those kinds of bureaucratic things. So they're gone. But sometimes Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, you get emails from them. And they said, hey, I actually was watching YouTube videos and now I found something, a new hydrogen system. We can do this in buildings as well. And why don't we figure out a way to do that in our project as well? And so things are upside down, and I had to learn that the top-down control mechanism that I grew up with 25 years ago are sort of dead. It doesn't work anymore. And that there's a new generation that wants to do things in a different way. Now, what is complicated is that we work with people from, let's say, I think the oldest person in the company is almost 60, and the youngest is probably 20. And we have different ways of doing things in the company at the moment. And these common values keep that together. So if you work here, you're not interested in sustainability, then we don't really have a role for you. But the way things are done is quite different from the different generations that we see.
How did it change then over time when you say, okay, this also changed also with the generations, but maybe something that happened when you started to enter that field of sustainability that also changed in the organization? I mean, we will definitely talk about the building as well and how people communicate here, but like what happened in that time organizational wise?
15 years ago, I think people would apply for a job at our company mainly because we were the most successful real estate company in the Netherlands, fastest growing, etc. And success was really measured by turnover and profit and growth. And today, I think people will apply for a job because they know that we are pushing innovation, that we're active in the PropTech industry, that we're doing so much on sustainability and health and smartness in buildings. And so people want to work in the forefront of change in the real estate industry, be a bit disruptive. They will come to us and say, hey, I want to work there. The values of these people is also different than the values 15 years ago. I'm not saying it's per se right or wrong, because I think everybody's also a product of his upbringing and the time that they grew up in. But it's quite a big change in the perspective people have.
When we were starting our conversation, I told you that in my company at Blackboard, we usually deal with communication tools, and we have a saying that we say that the office space is the most synchronous communication tool you have. It's made for meeting people, giving a secure space, building trust, and building relationships. And we entered here, and it was funny because like someone was at the door downstairs, although like these are not your floors downstairs, you were here in the 4th floor. But very open, said, hey, no worries, go up in the 4th floor. Someone was here, and you never have this feeling that there is a desk or a front here, but it's very open, people meet. So let's talk about the space you have here a little bit.
And I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, and every time when you enter a building, you have to go to a desk, they make a picture of you, you have to show identification, and you get a sticker, and with that sticker you go into the building. And every time you sort of ask yourself, why? Why is this being done? Is this helping against terrorism or theft, or what is it? Nobody has a story. They're just following procedure. We redesigned that here for this building, and here the whole thinking is it has to be a happy space. It has to be a space where you want to be, and even if your work is sort of done, then you don't really want to go home. You still want to sort of hang out and talk to people, and it must be cooler to work here than to work from home. And at the same time, we want to have collaboration, we want to have communication in the building. If you work, you could also work from home, you could also work for a coffee shop and drink coffee and work away a little bit. But you want to be here in the office, and there's so many informal moments that you talk to people and that you communicate. Most of that communication anyway is about the business that we're doing. So if you look at the coffee machine here, and we have good coffee, then people meet each other, and then somebody says, hey, yesterday I heard a rumor that there's this new technology happening in buildings, and are we looking at that already? And that communication, those accidental meetings that you see, they are a big factor of the success of our company. Another thing is that if we would have top talent coming out of universities and they apply for a job here, but they also go, I don't know, maybe to McKinsey, or they go to an accounting firm or Coca-Cola or whatever. In most cases, they enter buildings that are no fun, and they get into a meeting room, and the meeting room is sticky, and there's no real enjoyment there, and they can feel that. And then they come here, and they don't have to show their passport to get in. They are invited by a cup of coffee, they see a space that makes them feel at home, and they get a good feeling. And that good feeling helps us that they select us when they have to make a decision on where to work. So there's a lot of factors, a completely different thing, but we hope that in the future we will not rent out space anymore per square meter, because square meters sort of don't make sense. Make sense from a real estate perspective, but for a client, a customer, a tenant, he basically wants to have 100 people working somewhere, so he needs 100 workspaces. The question is, does he need 100? Because 20 people are always traveling, so maybe he needs 80. And then the next question is, but what is really relevant for him is what is sort of the productivity coming out of that group of people. And if we can make a building where the productivity is such that people don't go ill anymore, where more work is done because there's some magic in that building happening that is not happening anywhere else, then actually they're willing to pay more rent for that space. And we're in the process of measuring that. We are measuring what kind of air quality can we have in a building, what does sunlight do to concentration of people, and there's hundreds of factors that you can take into a picture, and you even use AI to measure what is, or to basically analyze what is happening exactly with people. And then in the future we hope that our rent will not be paid by square meter, but by productivity of that group of people working in the building, and that would be cool.
Love that approach. And I was just thinking of the coffee machine story. Did you know that Steve Jobs wanted to have the washrooms at Pixar in just one place of the building to make everyone force run at the washroom at the same time to like bump into each other by accident? Because he said this unplanned collaboration is where it comes from. And I love that story, even if it's most likely just made up, but I still love that story because it's true. Like, you bump into people, you talk to them, and then something happens.
On that story, we've done the same thing here. We have quite a big floor, but only one set of toilets. And then also we don't have male and female toilets.
We just learned it, yeah. We just ran into the toilet.
Because that's so old school. Some people are not defined by male or female anymore, and so that discussion is also solved on. It was some people had to get used to it. Ladies doing their hair in front of the mirror, guys walking around were like, uncomfortable. So we made a separate room where people can do makeup if they want. But we have to rethink some things. Yeah. Not everything that was done 50 years ago is still valid.
Yeah, everyone is running here. Like, we will, as I said, like, MP is filming. So this is a podcast that you can also watch if you want it. So maybe we do that. We take a walk around. I would learn. I love the details. My wife is much better in the details, I have to admit. Like what colors to use, and I can just feel that there's very good, calm, but productive energy in here. Like from the floor to the ceiling, a lot of wood, a lot of light. So there's a lot of stuff here I would love to learn about. So we now take you guys along on a walk. So you have to follow us by your ears, and we just make sure that we also tell what we see and what we talk about.
Great.
Let's do that.